Doom 2's final boss is a wall that consists of 9 textures, and yes, it's actually John Romero you're fighting, yada yada, common knowledge. The Icon of Sin sees you, says something satanic, and starts shooting spinning cubes which explode into demons. There's more to it than Romero said shooting monster cubes around. Let's take a look. First of all, a fully functional Icon of Sin consists of 2 entities, the cube spawner and cube targets. The cube spawner is the invisible eye that calls the A-look function every 10 ticks, which causes the spawner to wake up if it spots a player. When the Icon of Sin, or well, the invisible eye, wakes up, it will call the A-brain awake function. This function will look up every map object in the map, and if the object is a cube spawner target, it will be added to an array and the cube spawner target counter will increment by 1. Once done, it will play the creepy, distorted wake-up sound at full volume. Did you actually know this is a message from John Romero but played in reverse? After many hours of using the Googles, I couldn't find any information about it, so I took matters into own hands. Here we have the original audio file. And now played in reverse. Exactly 181 ticks, or about 5.17 seconds after waking up, the eye will start spitting cubes at a rate of 1 cube every 150 ticks, or about 4.3 seconds. When a cube is spat out, it runs the A-brain spit function. First thing it does is check the difficulty. If you're playing on I'm Too Young to Die or Hey, Not Too Rough, then the time between spits is doubled. Then it will select a cube spawner target from the array that we filled up in the brain awake function and increment the target counter by 1 for the next spit. There's a bit of a problem here though. What if there are no cube spawner targets present? Simple. The game crashes, as the array will be empty. What if the array is too full? It can only hold 33 targets. What if there's a 34th? Again, simple. The game crashes as it will read garbage data outside the array's boundary. So yeah, don't place more than 33 cube spawner targets. Then we'll spawn the actual spawn cube and set its reaction time to a very specific value. This value is calculated by checking the difference between the cube spawner's Y position and the cube spawner target's Y position, then dividing it by the cube speed and tick duration. In short, instead of doing a relatively expensive equation, it simply calculates the time it will take for the cube to reach its destination. What if you have multiple cube spawners? The counter is global, so sequentially the counter will increment and move on to the next target, even if the cubes are spawned on the same tick. Cube spawners, like monsters, all initiate their states with a random tick offset. So if you have multiple spawners, then they all call A-look on different game ticks, and cubes don't spawn simultaneously when all cube spawners wake up. Now we'll check out the spawn cube itself. It calls the A-spawnfly function every 3 ticks. The first thing it does is decrement the reaction time value, and then check if it's not 0. As long as it's not 0, it will keep flying. When reaction time hits 0, it has reached its destination and will spawn a random demon. Each demon has their own spawning probability, and it goes as follows. Most commonly are imps, that will spawn about 20% of the time, followed by pinkies at 15%. Spectres, cacodemons and mancubi all share the same probability of about 12%. The Hell Knight will spawn 9% of the time, and the Arachnotron sits at 8%. Then we have the Barons, Revenants and Pain Elements at 4%, and at the very bottom, and thankfully the rarest of them all, the Archfall at less than 1%. The cube bursts into flames, spawns the demon, tells the demon to wake up, and done. Now, there are 4 problems here. First problem here is the reaction time. If we go back to how the reaction time is calculated, you may notice an oversight if both Y positions are the same, as it will calculate a reaction time of 0. Why is this a problem? Well, if we look at the code that checks if the reaction time is 0, you'll see it decrements the value before comparing it. What happens here is that the reaction time will decrement to -1, and the cube will keep flying as it will never reach 0 again. Or does it? Reaction times are stored in signed 32-bit integers, which underflow to a positive number at -2,147,483,648. Then it will take another 2,147,483,647 decrement operations to reach 0. So if the reaction time starts at -1, it will take nearly 4.3 billion decrement operations for the cube to reach a reaction time of 0. A decrement operation is done every 3 ticks, or 85 milliseconds. So it will take about 368 billion milliseconds, or 11.6 years for a spawn cube to finally spawn a demon in this case. Problem 2. Saving the game doesn't save the cube spawner targets. The cube spawner target area will be empty when you load a save game, causing the game to crash the moment the Icon of Sin attempts to spawn a cube. Problem 3. The game is programmed to not allow monsters to telefrag the player or other demons unless it's map 30. Most of the time not a problem, since most map makers tend to only use icons of sin in maps that occupy slot 30. Although there are some hipster map makers out there that utilize cube spawners outside map 30. These demons won't telefrag each other or the player when the spawn cube lands on top of them, causing them to get stuck in each other. This weird telefrag rule also causes issues in map 30s that don't utilize the icon of sin at all. When monsters teleport into the map traditionally, they normally can't teleport in if the player or a demon occupies the teleport destination, but if the map occupies slot 30, they can telefrag whomever. And problem 4. Nightmare difficulty. Nightmare difficulty causes enemies to respawn on their initial position placed by the map maker, but when spawned by the icon of sin, this position is never initialized and always set to 0. What happens here is that enemies created by the spawn cube will respawn at the default coordinates x0 and y0. In Doom 2's map 30, x0 and y0 can be found here, and as you can see a lot of enemies respawned out of bounds. So how do you defeat the icon of sin? That's up to the map maker. Traditionally, you would place Romero's head inside its brain, but that isn't fundamental. You can also just place an exit switch. There's no way to stop the cube spawn from spawning cubes other than exiting the level. There are many reasons to use Romero's head to finish the icon of sin. First of all, it plays a full volume pain sound to give the player feedback the icon of sin is getting wrecked. Romero's head is programmed to finish the level when it dies, and it creates nice explosions to indicate the icon of sin is freaking dead. Other than being used for the icon, you can also use Romero's head to force the player to pistol start the next map. Simply place some explosive barrels, John Romero, and a teleport destination in a single spot, let the player telefrag everything, and the player will die, and the dying Romero head will end the level. When a dead player exits the level, we will start the next map with only a pistol. You can also do some cool visual effects with the explosions that appear when Romero dies. Here, for instance, the goal of the map is to destroy this big machine. Flipping the switch will crush a Romero to death inside the machine and create explosions to indicate the machine is being destroyed. Speaking of death explosions, how exactly do they work? Like all demons, Romero's head has a death state. This will call the A-brain scream function. Here, the function will generate 65 explosions spread randomly in height and along the x-axis relative to Romero's head between x-196 and x320 relative in multiples of 8. These explosions will always occur 320 units south of the head. Something odd about these explosions is that the epicenter is shifted 62 units to the east, so it will look lopsided. The range should have been x-280 and 280 for this to look normal. Kinda sloppy, huh? For every explosion, set a random absolute height between 128 and 640. Also apply random upwards thrust to move the explosion up. Their tick is also randomized, with some explosions less shorter than others. When on a third brain explosion state, call the function again to recalculate a new position, upward thrust and ticks. Keep in mind that these explosions are not just there for cosmetic reasons and can actually damage entities. These explosions are considered rockets internally, but get their state overridden to the brain explosion one. At the end of the A-brain scream function, the icon of sin will scream its alongside at full volume. Congratulations, you've beaten John Romero. Conclusion. Conclusion. How can we conclude this video? Oh yeah. Sandy Peterson fricked up the icon of sin textures because he used a 264 unit white line depth on the right side of the icon of sin's face instead of 256. Now there's a very noticeable gap between the icon's face and the horn. You're welcome. Thank you for watching, a big thank you to my patrons, and a massive thank you to the following sexy people. Anarchy Please, Andrew Yukimchuk, Andrei Koval, Andrei Diklin, Art Cox, ASCII Slinger, Austin, Beaks Make Me Coom, Ben Filkins, Brett Bozart, Brian C, Brian Thompson, Kappa Bitch, Chief Kochwake, Chris O'Neill, Christophine Place, Cyprian Rusin, Curtis Carter, Daniel Justice, Ewolf, Geis, Grzegorz Krukar, Jeff Russell, Joseph Coleman, Joseph Shantz, Joshua Scoggins, Justin Wang, Kami Nari, Karma1233, Corey Peterson, Kuba Pook, Lloyd Staats, Lynn Wickett, Mobild, Martin Medner, Mathieu Dubois, Matthias Zippert, Michael Donoway, Mr. Steelio Nan, Nolan Boyer, Penance, QuakeGamer632, Richard Loster, Roman Orehoff, Scarebank, Sean Wang, Sebastian Radcliffe, Sensodyne93, Space Duck, Steak Jacobs, Stephen Bone, Stephen Halustik, Syntax Error, Todd Tamash, Ted Roddy, The Shrimpy One, This Man, Trevor Whelan, Turbine2K5, Victorique Moe, Xenia, and Liquid Fusion. Your support has been incredible lately, I'm stunned. Thank you once again, see you next time.